I would like to sort of try to capture what has happened over the last 2 days, and we've been trying to do that over the 2 days, but I'm going to try and sum it up a bit. So basically, over the last 2 days, we have heard from speakers who have generated lively discussions around the role of community corrections, both for now and into the future. We have heard terms like R&R, pro-social attitudes and values, and modelling. We've heard about effective correctional practice, case management versus change management, role to facilitate change, active role of the community corrections officer, move from specific offence-based programs to general offence-based programs, problematic thinking supporting offending behaviour, problem-solving skills, STICS, focus on criminogenic needs, the development of a relationship with the offender to create the optimal learning environment, community protection, community safety, supervision and treatment commensurate with risk, continuous development of skills, evidence-based practitioners of client change, what works in supervising or in supervision of one-to-one, the interaction with the offender and how this relates to reoffending. So it's our interaction with the offender. And respectfully challenging inappropriate behaviour. I haven't ordered those terms in any specific way. It was just how the last 2 days have come together for me in terms of the key terms that were being raised. But many of these terms are familiar for us. Yet others are not so familiar when applied within a correctional environment. Change agent might be one of them, for instance. We already have a solid foundation to build on. We administer the LSIR, which forms the basis of the case plan for offenders. We assess the consequences of reoffending and target greater levels of resources to the group of offenders who pose the greatest risk and consequences of reoffending. Our service delivery model, which we introduced about 2 years ago, the matrix as it's also known, clearly targets higher level of resources in the form of intervention and monitoring to the higher risk, higher consequence group, and little or no intervention or monitoring to the lower end of the risk consequence spectrum. Our intervention strategies target the criminogenic needs, which we heard about over the last 2 days. We have clearly articulated quality standards and KPIs. The handbook that was launched yesterday also has a whole lot of material there that reflects some of the discussions that have taken place today, but also the building blocks that we have been putting into place over the last decade in some instances. We're intending to launch the practice guide for one-to-one intervention in early 2016. This all provides a really solid foundation for community corrections to work from and define the role of community corrections into the future. But I think one of the key points that was made by Guy yesterday was that we often go to trainings, we often go to conferences or seminars, or we will receive information, but it's left on the top shelf. We all have good intentions, and we think, yeah, that's great, that sounds really good, we can work with that. But we go back to the office and we get caught in the day-to-day and back to normal habits. And I think he talked about 6 months. Even when you're training, you need that consolidation takes about 6 months where we need to continually reflect on what we're doing. So I think it is important for us to remember not to be complacent about what we've heard today, what we've discussed today, and that everybody's responsible, starting with myself, through to the directors, the managers, the unit leaders, and community corrections officers to remain current and up to date and focused in making a commitment to continually improving what we do. We have filmed the proceedings over the last 2 days, and we will make this accessible to all community corrections staff via the internet. And I've been discussing how can we ensure that there's an energy that, for me, has been present over the last few days in this room. How can we replicate that out in the local offices? And we've tried to get representation from all the offices. And how can we engage? Sure, we'll have the speakers filmed, but it's also, I think, been the activities that have happened where you've had the opportunity to discuss as a group. And I think in terms of how we could replicate that, there's ways of doing it. So first off, I think it's encouraging your colleagues to actually view the proceedings. I think it's also around a staff development day, which engages further with the material and your colleagues, where we're almost having mini sessions, a mini session replicating this today, so that we could provide you with the exercises that were given in between each of these speakers. And I think there'll be some further work that needs to be done around how we can coordinate, because I think the trick to this is that we replicate it as best we can right across the state, rather than having it done differently in each location. So we'll get back to you in terms of how we'll do it, but in developing that kind of strategy, we'll work with the directors in the first instance. Community corrections, I think, has a strong role to play, both now and into the future in the criminal justice system. What that role is, how we define it, how we deliver against it is up to us. Firstly, as individuals, and secondly, as a collective, united group. Our role is one where we can make a difference. And I think we can make a difference in a positive way as opposed to a negative way. In the everyday decisions we make is where we can make that difference. That is in terms of how we practice our trade. And that occurs whether it's at my level and the interactions I have with other agencies at my level, or my interactions with you at a local level. But it's also at your level, whether you're a director, a manager, a unit leader, or at the officer level. These decisions should be informed by evidence, and I think we heard a lot of that over the last 2 days. In making these decisions, however, we need to be able to ask ourselves 2 questions. Will this decision or action reduce reoffending? And will it protect the community? Anchoring the role of community corrections in evidence-based practice will enhance stakeholder confidence and, I think, best position the sustainability of community corrections into the future. We need to foster a culture where practice follows evidence, is focused on continuous learning and the development of skills requiring each and every one of us to accept a leadership role, irrespective of where we're sitting in the organisation, in defining community corrections, and at the same time operating as one collective body. I would like to close this seminar today by extending my very sincere thanks to all the staff who have worked behind the scenes over the last 6 months to make the last 2 days possible. I think people aren't aware of how much effort it has taken and commitment of people behind the scenes to get us to where we are today. I'm not going to single out people because I'm sure I'll miss somebody. However, I would like to name a few. And I'll start with Jason Hainsworth for his leadership in terms of driving this seminar. The seminar working group, Naomi Chidham and Ingrid Pedersen, both in their role as a Community Corrections Officer, but also as executives of the Probation and Parole Officer Association. The 5 focus groups across the state who provided invaluable feedback into that handbook. And I'm hoping that handbook isn't something that's going to go sitting on a shelf somewhere. And Lynn Yuan, Georgia Kenny, Christina Morales and Joe Kennedy for their work behind the scenes as well. I would also like to thank the Corrective Services New South Wales Audio-Visual Production Unit, who have been with us over the last two days filming the proceedings, which will enable us to provide access to staff who haven't been able to attend today. And thank you also to Jessica Smith. Without her, we wouldn't have had the handbooks yesterday, because she kindly, at very short notice, picked up the handbooks from Cessnock. And a final thanks to you all. I think this wouldn't have been possible today, in terms of where we are today, without the active discussion, your preparedness to look at what we are doing, what our practice is, and to take on board some of the evidence that the various speakers were able to put to us. What I'd like to do, basically to finish off, Jason and I will finish off with questions, just in case there are any pressing issues that have emerged from today that you would like to raise, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you very much. Has there been a noticeable change or increase in revocations for intensive corrections orders due to the community service work? As a community service organiser myself, having been at CCG, I believe anecdotally that breaches and revocations have increased. And if that is the case, has it impacted negatively on parole units?
My understanding is that it hasn't increased in any substantial manner, but I haven't looked at the data to compare it, sort of pre-merger, post-merger. Jason, have you got more recent figures?
Yep. So there's been a slight increase. One of the things to bear in mind, though, is that the during the CCMG period, one of the major problems with the maintenance of the community service work component was complete inconsistency across the state. There was we had offenders that were getting through to the end of the orders having not worked a day, and that's clearly not acceptable either. So yes, there was a slight increase. It's not a significant increase. One of the biggest increases, though, has been in the volume of revocations or breaches. And the reason for that is increase in the volume of offenders. We've simply got more eco offenders, therefore we're going to have more breaches.
Hello. I know the one thing that politicians all listen to is money. And the figures that we looked at earlier suggested that there was a 10% decrease of reoffending because of work that we do. Is it possible to get a monetary value on that 10%?
Short answer is yes, but it's not as straightforward as you'd think. Because one of the problems that we have, and I say this in terms of community corrections, is that we're part of corrective services. Okay, so the average cost per inmate per day is quite significant. I forget what the figure is off the top of my head. It's about $180-something per day. The average cost for a community-based order is about $23 per offender per day. That's the average, so high-risk offender is more, low-risk offender is less. One of the difficulties in making that argument is you have to be very, very careful, because if we say, we're keeping our people out of prison, I say, well, great, your corrective services, you're budgeted to keep people in custody and in the community. If you're moving them into the community, you're saving yourselves money, therefore we're going to take however many million out of your budget and you're going to have to continue to operate. Now, against an increasing inmate population, that argument doesn't fly very well. So what we have to talk about is diversion rather than reduction in offending. So yes, certainly those arguments are made, but they're a lot more complicated, particularly because of the increase in the inmate population that's happening at the same time. Yeah.
Can I add one other thing? We also make the argument that it's in diverting from custody or reducing the ones that are returning to custody, there are opportunities there in terms of not being required to build additional jails. So if you're operating at full capacity, you can sort of, we do put those kind of arguments up. And in terms of the arguments we're needing to put up as a organisation, that we're starting to move more and more down that track of cost-benefits analysis in terms of any strategies we're putting forward, and government's moving towards that model, which I think is a valid way of progressing.